If you're not careful, your passion project won't just be difficult, it could financially ruin you. Nick Macari created his graphic novel and it ended up costing him tens of thousands of dollars that he wasn't able to make back through traditional comic sales. Luckily for all of us, he's laid out what his costs are so we can make different choices and won't end up in the same financial situation. It doesn't matter if you've never made a comic before or you're making your 10th comic, hiring people to help you out can be really expensive. But don't worry, once we've broken down how much it cost Nick, I'll show you 3 options so it won't cost you the same. Nick is a writer who created a 118-page hardcover graphic novel. The idea, the story and the script cost nothing. These were the things that Nick created as a writer and he essentially worked for free. He also edited the entire thing except for a copy editor which he hired for $150. Next is the art, which cost a tiny little bit more. For the pencils, inks and colors, it came to a grand total of $11,775, which is around about $100 per page for the art. Next, the cover art, including a variant cover, cost $800. He also mentioned that he ended up losing an additional $800 on bad art and artists who just didn't give him any work and instead just took their deposit and ran. Don't worry, we'll cover best practices, so hopefully you don't run into that same problem. He said that he bought the rights to use period accurate historic advertisements. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it cost him $500. Now, once the book interiors were done, he needed someone to put them together, but he ended up doing it himself. So the creation of the PDF didn't cost him anything either except his time and energy. So the total is $14,025 for a 100-page graphic novel. This is actually quite cheap and I think he's done pretty well, especially when you consider the $800 loss on bad artists. If you were to include all of the elements that Nick did for free, then Nick estimates another $10,000 cost to the creation of the book, which would put it over $24,000. Bear in mind that we haven't even printed this thing yet, but that's what Kickstarters are for, right? Yes, but that's not the end of our costing. He paid $500 for art for the campaign page, $500 for the campaign rewards, $500 for a marketing campaign, and had to factor in $8,500 for the printing costs. So I figure that there's 2 final costs for this. If we take away the work that Nick did for free, it comes to $24,025. But if we factor that back in, we're looking at $34,025. But wait, there's more. Shipping. Nick had some issues with the shipping, and chances are you probably will too. And he estimates that for him, the costs were around $1,200. Now his Kickstarter succeeded, which is incredible in and of itself, but it wasn't a huge success and it didn't cover his costs for him. The pre-sales from the campaign brought in $9,465, but Nick received $8,519 after Kickstarter took their cut. This brings the cost down to $16,706 with Nick's free work, or $26,706 with Nick's work accounted for. Now he doesn't go into huge detail about how much profit and loss he had, but he recouped about 33% of his costs, and if he sells his stock, then that will bump it up to about 50%. So by my maths, that puts him anywhere between $8,000 and $13,000 down. So will you have to fork out 25 grand to fund your comic? Well, it depends. The way I see it, you have 3 options. Option 1, hire people. Option 2, free or cheap labor. And option 3, DIY. There are pros and cons to each of these options, but really it's about how much you're willing to work versus how much you're willing to spend. For option 1, you're going to have to get good at vetting people and also make a habit of drawing up contracts. For Nick, some of the bad artists that he spoke to would call him bro a lot. You don't have to be ultra professional and show no personality, but for me personally, I'm not going to give a deposit for someone who constantly calls me bro. And by making sure you have a contract which includes how much the artist will be paid, what is expected of the artist, as well as their deadline, it gives you some legal options in case things go bad. And I would like to take this moment to speak on behalf of the vast majority of comic artists. We don't want to steal your money and would never steal your money, and we would much rather a contract was in place than not. So yeah, not all artists are douchebags. But ultimately, you get what you pay for. If you pay top dollar for artists, then you should expect the best work. But if you're drawn more towards option 2, then you're running different sorts of risks. If your main concern is money, there are lots of artists who are willing to work either for free or for very, very cheap.
That's good.
But because there's nothing holding that artist in place in the form of a deposit, there's nothing stopping them from leaving the project whenever they want.
That's bad.
But you could ask them if they would do more pages for a lesser overall fee, which means you're paying more upfront but less for each page.
That's good.
But the artist may contain potassium benzoate.
That's bad.
Can I go now?
Now, option number 3 is my personal favorite because it pretty much eliminates all financial risk for your comic. The main downside is that you kind of have to learn to draw and write, which are both very, very difficult things to do. But the upside of that is that you never have to pay a penny and you can make as many comics as you like for free. Like I said, there are pros and cons for each option, and ultimately it's down to what you're willing to pay versus what you're willing to risk. But it's also worth pointing out that the traditional way of creating, printing and selling your comics is nowhere near as effective as it used to be. You might get lucky and strike gold, but for the majority of us, you're probably going to be operating at a loss if you think you can just create your comic, print it out and then put it on the shelf and expect the money to roll in to fund the sequel. It sucks, it's frustrating, but it's just the way it is for most of us. So give up? No printed comics? No. There are alternatives, although you may not like them. Everything else I'm about to say is primarily about gaining and leveraging attention. That means marketing, it means social media, and it means marketing. And marketing is a confusing, frustrating beast that very few of us truly understand. Now, you can choose to throw some money behind it and pay for some ads, but even if you do that and get eyeballs on your comic, it might not actually be enough. And at best, you might break even. The fact is, your comic on its own may not be enough. And in fact, as we saw with Nick, it likely isn't. So what else can you do as a creator? I'm going to dive much deeper into this topic, but as a general overview, here are some things that you can do to drum up some funds for your comic project now and in the future. You could, and probably should, see yourself as a business that offers a service. If you're a writer, then you could offer to edit someone else's project for them. Some creators are going to be able to afford and are willing to pay for a copy editor to edit their comic for them. You can be that copy editor. Nick invested $150 for his, so if you do a few of those, then you could rack up enough to pay for a certain number of pages, or maybe put into the marketing budget or the Kickstarter campaign. You know what your skill set is, so lean into your strengths and offer them out to other people. And this is the thing that you're probably really not going to like, but I'm not sure there's a better way to get your name out there. You may have heard it from so-called gurus, but I think they are right when they say that giving away value for free is the best way to gain an audience online these days. If you're a writer, you could put together a few videos or articles on how to do script writing for comics, and then maybe include a paid for version on something like Skillshare. For me, I think YouTube is probably the best social media platform, at least it's the one that I've connected with the most. And on top of that, it can be an effective way to earn money through YouTube, and that can then directly fund your comic projects. In fact, on YouTube this year alone, I've earned, well, I guess you'll have to subscribe to find that out. It was nothing. I've earned nothing. Damn, I just spoiled it. Oh well, subscribe anyway, because it actually did go a lot better this year than last year, so progress. In fact, you can see exactly what I tried, what worked, and what really, really didn't work in this video here.